Peace, people. It's me, Arlene J. Ramsey, CEO and founder of Everyone Let's Talk, also your favorite self-wealth mentor. I have a question for you guys. What does the 3/5 clause mean to you? And what do you think that 3/5 clause mean to our system? Have you given that any thought? And also, why does the 3/5 clause still exist? Why is it still in our Constitution? Have anyone thought about questioning that on a, how can I say, a higher level, on a grander level, on a constitutional level? Here's why I ask, because when you go back to, how can I say, when you research that 3/5 clause, there's several different meanings that pops up. You know, it's not quite clear or precise as to exactly what the 3/5 clause mean and what it stands for. Also, what are the how can I say, limitations and all the little agreements and protocol that falls under or within that 3/5 clause. Right? So whenever there's a law or whenever there's a clause, you ought to know that there's a list of rules and regulations that fall within each law. Correct? That's something for you guys to think about. So let me read here what I've read out loud what I've read. Okay, I've read on one article where it says that the 3/5 clause have been moved, like they moved the status of Africans in America from 3/5 of a human being to second class citizenship. All right, and you need to pay close attention to that. 3/5 of a human being to second class citizens. All right, now let me read this to you. One second. The 3/5 clause, frequently called the 3/5 compromise, was actually not much of a compromise at all. The provision was a huge victory for slavery and gave nothing to those who favored freedom. The power of a fraction. 3/5 clause. The 3/5 clause is perhaps the most misunderstood provision of the U.S. Constitution. The clause provides that representation in Congress will be based on the whole number of free persons and 3/5 of all other persons. The other persons were slaves. Despite popular understandings, this provision did not declare that African Americans were 3/5 of a person. Rather, the provision declared that the slave states would get extra representation in Congress for their slaves, even though those states treated slaves purely as property. Thus, this was a provision that was not directly about race, but about status and the allocation of political power. Free blacks were counted in exactly the same way as whites. The clause did not say that slave was 3/5 of a person. The clause said nothing about free blacks who were treated by the clause exactly as free whites were. Rather, the clause provided a mathematical formula that allowed for the allocation of representatives in Congress that factored in the slave population. No slaves could vote in the country, although free blacks could vote in a number of states. And the clause did not provide a voice for slaves. This was about the distribution of a political power among the states. It is also, what you know, a formula for influence. Here's why I decided, I know I talked about this clause in a previous recording, but I decided to bring this up again because this morning I saw someone posted, there was a meme that posted, how did it go? Michael Vick's dogs received more justice than Eric Garner, Trayvon Martin, and Mike Brown. So this brings me to saying that, excuse me, if the Constitution have people of African descent or descendants of slavery as 3/5 of a person, then they are operating within protocol. And, or, if the 3/5 clause meant that those who once owned slaves had 3/5 of more power than those who didn't own slaves, they are still operating within law. Simply because those who are in power, who still own power and rights as per the said clause, still has a great say so as to what is going on in this country. And of course many of you know that, right? Correct? But my reasoning for pointing this out is that we need more strong opinions and strong voices concentrating on this clause and concentrating on some of the laws that exist. Simply because these police officers and anyone who have a certain level of position that people of African descent come across and end up in situations of injustice, and that said person in the position of power decide to operate solely via protocol or via law, the outcome would be exactly what we are seeing. Does that make sense to you? The outcome would be what we see, because they're not operating on their feelings. They're operating on the fact that they can do certain things and get away with it under a certain clause or under a certain rule or under a certain law and be protected. Whichever way you put it, it is a double entendre, and whichever way it is looked at or whichever way it is believed to have been or believed to be, it doesn't put people of African descent in any position to rise above their circumstances, especially those who choose not to rise above their circumstances from within, on a holistic, on a spiritual, on a progressive level. Does that make sense to you? Now here's what I mean by that. There are plenty of people of African descent who have not experienced racism. I'm one of them. I have not been mistreated, thrown in slammers, or received, any injustices or any ill will from white people. Now, I am not saying that it does not exist. I can say maybe it's because of the way I handle myself. I can say that I'm open-minded. I can say that, I'm self-educated. I, like to learn new things. I love to grow. I can say that there's many things about me which may have caused me to always be in good standing. I'm still alive. I will be 38 years old next week, so who knows what will happen in the future. But what I'm saying is, as of now, I cannot say that I was mistreated by white people. But that doesn't hold true for many of my brothers and sisters that I have seen have been mistreated by white people, who have gotten great disservices have been done to them. All right. So I also point out that we as a people, as a whole, should not be punished for our ignorance. Right? When is it that we'll get to the point where we can be allowed to be ignorant and not lose our lives for it? That's a question to ask. And of course many of you have asked that question, but it is something for you to think about, not on a emotional level, but on a logical level. Now here's why I say that. When we think about things on a logical level, we tend to dig deep, go to the source, and try to eliminate that which puts us in jeopardy. All right? And therefore making us better opponents, making us well worth the fight.